Start button. All right, so today we are looking at, where are you? Here you are. We are looking at agriculture, okay? Now, if you recall, all right, and usually I can write it up on the board, but I didn't today. It's Friday, I'm lazy. All right. Last time we talked about how basically, some of the origins of humanity. You do need to be familiar with terms like hominid and hominin, okay? That we didn't come into, and no offense to your religious beliefs, we didn't come into existence and boom, all right? There was a process of evolution that took place over literally millions upon millions upon millions of years to get to where we are right here, okay? Now, I did ask you to remember a couple of things, a couple of H words, okay? Hominids, which includes not just humans, but what else? What other primate? Gorillas and chimps, yes, okay? Those are our nearest relatives, genetically, let's say, all right? And then, of course, humanity falls under the category of hominin, okay? Now, there are different forms of hominin, okay? But which one eventually survived and outlived them all? Homo sapiens, which is what all of us are here. A couple of you might have small microscopic traces of some other hominin that your ancestors 50,000 years ago intermarried. And so you're like, or not intermarried, intermixed. And so now you carry it with you, but Homo sapien.
If chimpanzees ever evolved to like a sentience, like a human level, would they be hominins or still hominins?
I think they would still be considered hominin. But yeah, I'm not a paleontologist, so I'm not in charge of reclassifying them. So yeah, okay. And so some of the hominins, though, that I did ask you to remember, Homo habilis. Okay, what's special about Homo habilis? Tools, yes. All right, tools. All right. Homo erectus. Walking upright, and then someone said the F word. No, not that one, but it doesn't. I said Ford. Oh no, I said F, not Ford. Yes, you're right. Family, but someone said fire. Okay, they're the ones that discovered fire, and yes, they're the ones that suddenly realized, wait a minute, we came from the same mother. There's like something like we're a group, we're a family. Okay, it's not just some other random animal. Okay, and then of course Homo sapien, which is the one that eventually survives. And so we talked about many of the things that Homo sapien developed, and the big E word, evolution. Okay, so remember that concept. It's that change over time to adapt to the environment. Okay, some people know it as survival of the fittest. Basically, you adapt successfully so that your genes, your DNA, are passed on to the next generation, and then they survive, and then they pass that on. Okay, which is why Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, Homo erectus, Australopithecus, all of those are gone. Okay, but Homo sapien survived. All right, and then we get to this. All right, this is the biggest change now. Agriculture. All right, around 10,000 BCE, which is about 12,000 years ago. Okay, humanity begins to abandon this hunter-gatherer lifestyle. But humanity has basically lived this lifestyle for about 300,000 years. Humans have been surviving by picking whatever fruits off trees, vegetables off the ground, and whatever animal they've been able to kill. Okay? But now people realize that you can grow certain things on purpose, and you can have meat next to you as well. All right, what happens? Well, number one, because remember during this time, and I think one of you mentioned, basically the last ice age, and so the ice age begins to end. Global temperatures begin to rise, which means, and yeah, I'm I'm glad I have windows. More vegetation. Okay, more trees, more plants, more whatever. And of the ones that had survived and had been, happening during the Ice Age, now they're bigger and they're more robust. Okay, and so because of this, humans don't have to travel as often. Humans don't have to travel as far anymore. Because a small tree, and it's just easier for me with apples, that only produce 10 apples, now as the Ice Age is disappearing and global temperatures are rising, it's now like a couple bushels, all right? So we don't have to leave as often, all right, when it comes to that. Now, the other thing that happens, and once again, this is over a period of a couple thousand years, does anyone know what the word domestication means? Yeah.
It's like you make whatever, like wild grass, and you turn it into corn or wheat or
Yeah.
whatever. You make it more suitable for people.
Yeah, some people, especially for animals, you use the word you tame them. You make them used to humanity. Humans realize that we don't have to wait for these things to just happen. We can make it grow on purpose. Like we can take the seeds, put it in a certain place, and it will grow when we want it to. Okay? And so, you domesticate plants, like you said. You take wild grasses, and next thing you know, you've done it so that it's now broccoli or corn or whatever vegetable, whatever thing you're going to eat. And with animals, okay, you're able to capture an animal and keep it, and the animal just never leaves. And we think that one of the first ones, or, the first one were dogs, but those weren't used for food. But one of the first animals were sheep. And so eventually you have a boy sheep and you have a girl sheep, and, they get together and they make you baby sheeps, and the baby sheeps just never leave, all right, because they're there, all right? And so now you don't have to go out to hunt. You got a whole slew of baby sheeps that you can kill for your meat. Okay, and so humanity begins to settle down. All right, and just FYI, agriculture does include plants and animals. It's not just, oh yeah, you're a farmer. No, it also includes the raising and domestication of animals. All right, so the different things, and so we begin to see two new lifestyles. Number one, what we call settled agriculture. This is what we think of when we think of farms. Okay, you have a farm, you have the fields, you go out there, you work, come back, you work, and then it grows and you harvest it and you have food. And then pastoralism refers to the animals. Okay, taking your animals and grazing them and bringing them back into the pen and all of the other stuff. All right, now. Like I said, okay, and I already kind of explained this, all right, so I got ahead of myself. It's not just that we see now more plants, but the plants that had existed during the Ice Age, they're bigger, they produce more, humans don't have to move around as much, okay? And so in this case, because of that, there's actually some plants that, or some fruits or vegetables that go to waste. And humans begin to realize, if we take the stuff that's inside those seeds and we plant them in certain areas, and we do like these little things, we can actually make it grow how we want them to and where we want them to. And we can actually make them produce this stuff, so we don't actually have to go out there into the wild, into the unknown, to try to find more. We can make it happen right here. So we can now establish a permanent place, okay, where we can always be, all right? In addition, if we like something, and once again, if you really like apples, you can have those, constantly, as opposed to we've eaten all the apples here, so we move on hoping to find more, and next thing we know, we end up in an area where it's this round, orange-looking fruit. Okay, it's like, well, damn it, what happened to the apples? Now we have these orange-looking things. All right, so you can have that same plant over and over again. All right, as I mentioned, dogs are the first animal to actually be domesticated. Not necessarily used for food, though. Okay, that's not to say that there aren't cultures that use them for food, but what purpose do dogs serve? Tracking, number one, so they help with hunting.
Centuries.
Yes, protection, because it's still the stone age. I mean, there's still like tigers and all that crazy shit out there. All right, so yes, okay. And those of you that are dog people, those of you that have dogs, I mean, what else do they provide? Companionship. Yeah, they're actually, they're good friends. They're, they'll sit with you, they'll cuddle, all that stuff. Which, I know today, it's just no, but, imagine living out there and not having, language or people or whatever. And yeah, they provide that companionship and that comfort. When it comes to food and other resources, okay, like I said, one of the first were wild sheep. Okay, and so the sheep are brought in. They're caught. They're enclosed. They're forced to stay. Eventually, like I said, boy sheep, girl sheep. All right, they do their business, and now you have baby sheeps everywhere. And of course, because they're used to humanity, that's it. They're yours. They're there. Okay. Now, in addition to the obvious, when it comes to sheep, there's a reason why they were the first. In addition to the meat, okay, what else do sheep provide? Wool, yeah. And yes, eventually you can take the wool, you spin it into fabric, and you get clothes. All right? So having the sheep here and as your, product, yeah, at some point you are going to kill it and have it for lunch and, some sheep steaks and sheep burgers and all that mutton. I don't know. I don't eat sheep a lot. But of course, up until that time, you have their wool and now you have a way to cover yourself. Now you have a way to create clothes that isn't literal animal skin. Okay? What else can a sheep and similar animals provide?
Milk.
Milk, yes. Thought I was going to have to drop lots of hints. All right, but yes, milk. Humans discover that, we can, on the new mothers, we can, I'm thinking of a cow. I don't know what sheep have. All right, I know almonds are hard to milk. They're like really teeny. But, we can have the milk, and not only will it provide, a drink and nutrients and whatnot, but, and I don't expect you all to know this, maybe you're not dairy farmers, but what else can you get from milk? Cheese. Okay, yeah, if we let it spoil for a bit, all right, we're going to get this yummy stuff, all right? Cheeses and yogurts and creams and Alfredo sauce and, okay, that's a couple thousand. But, you can add other things, all right, that isn't just meat from the sheep, okay? And so in this case, this type of lifestyle, yeah, you want to increase your flock. You want to take care of it. You can't keep it in one place because, so you take them out, they graze, they eat, and then you bring them back home, all right? And that becomes part of the lifestyle. Once humanity does this with sheep, in other parts of the world, and sometimes, within the same areas and in different parts, depending on what animal is there, humans domesticate goats, humans domesticate cows, humans domesticate pigs. All right, FYI, chickens were one of the last, and I don't think we've ever truly domesticated the chicken. And I speak to this as someone who's been chased by a rooster before. Yeah.
You didn't establish pecking order.
I know, right? I was a kid, so I think the rooster was dominant there. The chickens were. All right, but with each of these, I mean, goats, cows, pigs, yeah, they provide, the milk. They provide the wool, all right? At least with goats, anyone know what we call goat wool?
Cashmere?
Cashmere, yeah. So if you have anything made of cashmere, that's goats. Okay, just FYI. You're like, shit, I'm wearing goat. No, it's not that cold. Cows, well, I mean, what do we use from a cow for clothing? Leather, yeah, that's their skin. All right, so if any of you are wearing leather or leather shoes, all right, yeah, you're wearing cow. All right, pigs, well, we don't really use it for clothing that much, although you can use the leather. All right, if you play football, they used to make them out of pig skin. All right, so stuff like that, I guess, first thing for football. But yeah, you can get milk from each of these, you can get all the other stuff. Okay, now, dealing with animals. All right. Once again, because obviously you want a big enough herd and you want to take care of it because it doesn't just provide the meat, it provides other food stuff and it provides other resources. We begin to see the development of new and different lifestyles, but at the same time, kind of the same, but just an adaptation of the old hunter-gatherer, okay? And so, we have two types of people that deal with animals, okay? Number one, transhumance pastoralism, all right? In this case, and this is the one that most people will think about when they associate it with agriculture, you have a home base, all right? Your farm, your ranch, your house, whatever, the village, boom, okay? At some point, you need to take your herds out, okay? Because obviously, and especially if you have goats, all right, they have eaten all the grass and all the whatevers around your village, your house, your ranch, whatever. So you take them out. ¿Qué pasa?
History of civilization class.
Oh yeah, sorry, I slipped. Some of you are like, didn't even notice you said it in Spanish. Yeah, sorry, okay. And so, you take your herds out into the mountains, into the fields, into the valley, whatever, and out there, you spend weeks, months, with them. They grow, they eat, they wander, they get fat, their wool, they have baby goats and baby sheeps and, all that other stuff. And so then you come back at the end of the season, all right, you bring them all back into your pens, into your farm, into your ranch, your village, and yes, okay, they are able to provide, okay, you come back during the shearing season, so you cut off all their hairs, and you're able to spin the wool into some kind of clothing, into some kind of cloth. You milk the mothers, whether it's a cow, a goat, whatever, okay? So now you have milk to drink and milk to feed your young, but at the same time, you have milk to make cheeses and yogurts and sauces and other things that make your food just a teeny tiny bit better, okay? And of course, once the animal has either outlived its usefulness or in order to keep your herds manageable, you kill a certain amount and now you have your meat, your steaks, bacon. Damn, I'm hungry. Bacon and ham and sausage. And, yeah, I didn't have, all I had was a bagel this morning. So now I'm, want some real breakfast food. All right, type of thing. All right. Now, the other type of lifestyle, and this is a constant for like several thousand years. And it's one that we call nomadic pastoralism. So people are still wandering. People are still going back and forth across these great expanses. So there's no fixed home. There's no settlement, okay? And so these are the groups that we begin to think of as the hordes, all right? Most of them wander across Central Asia, all right? Taking dozens and dozens and hundreds of years, they move across Asia, all right, with all of their animals and all of their people, and they pack up their tents and they follow these hordes, and whatever, they're constantly on the move. They have no permanent place, okay? When these hordes need something, generally they will arrive at the nearest settlement, rape, plunder, murder, pillage, kidnap, burn it down, steal it, okay? And now they have their stuff and they just keep on going. I mean, they might try to trade, but that was kind of the exception, all right? Typically they did that. Now, because they're following these huge herds and because, like, it makes them better warriors and much more fearsome, they are the first group to tame, to domesticate the horse, okay? It's not the villagers, it's not the farmers, okay? It's these groups, okay? Because how else are you going to keep up with all of your animals that you're following across thousands of miles through Asia, okay? You're on a horse. All right, makes it a lot easier. You're always moving. You're not as tired. Oh, and by the way, when I go to raid this village, right? Sorry, villagers. All right, you're going to be a lot more afraid and a lot more intimidated if we show up on horseback. All right, to completely destroy, pillage, plunder, kidnap, and take all the stuff we need from you. Okay, so those are the two groups, and yeah, those nomadic pastoralists. I mean, all the way into the some of the modern era we still see.
I was gonna ask, I know like a lot of warlike tendencies, a lot of that is very popular, like Mongol, etc.
Yeah.
Was that all the way back in like domestication? Oh,
Yeah.
damn.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, those groups lasted for thousands of years.
They had a lot of factors.
Yes. Okay. They were the first ones to perfect. Don't get me started. Like mounted horseback warfare, and they're the ones that came up with chariots and stuff like that. Eventually, like the settled villages realized, oh hey, yeah, horses are useful for more than just following these hordes and plundering villages. But it was these groups that invented, that came up with the domestication of horse. They're the ones that invented like stirrups and bridles and hey, this way we can control them, this way we can stand and shoot arrows and fight and have more stability while I ride up and like chop these villagers' heads off, type of thing. And so yeah, eventually all of that gets spread, into quote unquote civilization. But we'll get to that in the next few weeks. All right. Now, the first area, that's why this is up, the first area to develop modern agriculture, to do all of this, is an area called the Fertile Crescent. Okay. The Greeks call it Mesopotamia. That's a Greek word. Mesopotamia literally means between the rivers. Okay. Where is Mesopotamia? Find a map, find modern day Iraq. All right. That's where it happened. That's the first place pretty much on this planet where we see the development of this kind of agriculture on a large scale. Okay? It starts around 9,000 BCE, so about 11,000 years ago. So we first begin to see small evidence, 12,000 years ago. Within 1,000 years, it's everywhere in Iraq. All right? Now, there are reasons why it happens there, and we'll get into that. All right? But the crops that they domesticate, all right, the things that they actually grow. I know I'd like to use the oranges and the apples and other things like that, but it was a lot more basic, all right? Wheat and barley. That's what they were able to grow, all right? What do we use wheat for? Bread. We still use it today, bread, all right? So they had a very bread diet. Now, it wasn't like the bread we think of today. You go down to Walmart and you buy a loaf and lot different, lot harder, not as good type of thing. But it provided sustenance, all right? It was nutrients, it was filling, okay? I love this one. What's barley used for? Beer. Yeah, you stole his answer. Yeah, no, that's okay. Beer, all right? Beer has been around for thousands of years, just FYI.
So this is kind of like my own thought, Ken. I'm pretty sure for like the majority of the majority of civilized human history, we've been drunk. Because when you get a bunch of people in like a localized area, it gets a lot harder to find like clean water. So you're practically just chugging them back.
Yeah, I always like to kid that life has sucked forever, so we need the alcohol. No offense to those of you that don't drink or in recovery, but no, the reason why is because for most of human history, clean water did not exist. You could drink water from a river, from whatever, but you never knew, the cleanliness of the source. And people, you had diseases like diphtheria and typhoid and a bunch of other ones that come from drinking dirty water. But the fermentation process kills those bacteria. And so guess what? If you actually want to drink something that isn't going to give you this disease that's gonna kill you, guess what you drink? Beer. All right. So yeah, you actually have. Granted, it's not a huge thirst quencher. It actually dehydrates you more. But at the very least, okay, you are not going to die of one of these waterborne diseases.
And it's a lot of easily accessible calories.
Yes, and it's calories. Okay, and so right now, when humans are dying from, saber-toothed tigers and starvation and whatnot, no, this is just water, trust me. Yes, you have those calories. Okay, now, in Iraq, we do get the domestication. Like I said, sheep were the first, but then the people, the Mesopotamians in the area, discovered that they could do the same thing with goats. Okay, they could do the same thing with pigs and camels and cattle. We could domesticate them. We can use them for all of these things. And for those of you, just FYI, you think, yeah, camels, they could ride them. No, there is such a thing as camel milk. You can use the camel hair, and while I personally have never tried it, you can eat camel. Okay, yeah. Okay, so you do have that, and so the thing about agriculture is that you have food. It keeps people alive. It brings people together. And so we begin to see these simple ranches, these simple villages begin to grow and expand into the first cities. All right? And so this is where we begin to see the formation of what we would consider today different societies. Now, just once again, Santos map obsession, all right? The green area is what is known as the Fertile Crescent. Because what's it shaped like? A crescent, yeah. I've had people say croissant. I'm like, you're right, that's just the French word for crescent. All right, yeah, and sausage, bacon, we've been talking on a croissant, yeah. Okay, I'm going to the cafeteria afterwards, all right? But Mesopotamia, remember, the word is Greek, that means between the rivers, okay? You've got two rivers. You got the Tigris, you've got the Euphrates. Thousands of years ago, this was one of the most fertile areas, okay? Because you got two rivers, all right, pouring water, and you need water for agriculture, okay? Now, an easy way to remember, okay, just FYI, which one's the Tigris, which one's the Euphrates? If you notice, they kind of run parallel, but then like kind of at an angle into the south. They both empty into the Persian Gulf. Tigris sounds like tiger, so tigers, like, they leap, they pounce, they're on top, okay? So Tigris is the one in the north, Euphrates is the one in the south. I know most of you don't care about geography, but trust me, one day that will come in handy, all right? 30 years from now, you're going to be like, I remembered. Damn you, bless you, Santos. I know you're probably dead by now, but yes, I remembered which one was the Tigris, which one was the Euphrates, because Tigris pounce, it's north. All right, so this is where it all happened, and in fact, it actually happened down here, all right, in southern Iraq, okay, is where we get the first cities, the first societies, because that's where most of the farming was happening, okay? Now, it wasn't the only place, okay, and I'm going to nerd out here for a second. This is the amazing thing about history and humanity and like all of this stuff. Because agriculture happens in different parts of the world, and it wasn't like today where I could just post something to Instagram. Hey, I figured out how to grow wheat, here you go. Barley to beer, yay, everyone do this. No, and in some cases, yes, the information traveled from point A to point B, and other groups begin to do it. But for the most part, humans in these different parts of the world that are isolated by thousands and thousands of miles came up with it, independent of each other. Okay? So it's kind of like, whoa, all right? It's like this great awakening worldwide. All right? And so, we're going to look at, obviously, Mesopotamia. That's in the next chapter, chapter 2. In Africa, outside of Egypt, because Egypt is typically looked at on its own, but there is evidence of agriculture in the Sudan. Sudan is just south of Egypt, which we will look at Egypt, all right, around the Nile River, okay, around 6,000 BCE, we see the first evidence, and the Nile River for thousands of years has literally been the breadbasket of the ancient world. Like, everything has grown there within, several miles on each side of the Nile. The Nile has been very reliable in providing food and sustenance and civilization. Okay, so we're going to look at Egypt. About 1,000 years, 2,000 years after it happens in Iraq, in China, around 7,000 BCE, agriculture takes place. And it's not as if somebody walked all the way to China and said, yo, Chinese people, this is how you do it. Okay? No, it was something that developed on its own. Whereas in Egypt, we see pretty much the same crops. We see wheat and barley and a lot of the same animals domesticated. In China, we see different crops. And it wasn't like today where you can find pretty much anything on any part of the planet. Back then, certain foods and certain things were very localized and centralized and didn't grow anywhere else. So in China, there is a wheat-like substance known as millet, which is also used to make a different type of bread, and of course, rice. Okay, so the domestication of rice begins in China. In India, in the Indus River Valley, okay, we also see the development of agriculture. Okay, and then finally in both Mexico and Peru. All right, now these are some of the last places, because as you recall, when it came to human migration over the hundreds of thousands of years, what was the last continent to be settled?
America.
Yeah, the Americas. Okay, so the natives in Mexico and Peru, not because they were slower, but they just got there later. Okay, and so they did develop though. Oh, sorry, I thought you had a question. All right. We will look at Egypt and China and India and at some point agriculture in Mexico and Peru. All right, and so once again, Santos and his maps. This is not from your textbook, but you can go onto Brightspace and look at the slides. This one shows then some of the areas and the things that they domesticated. So for example, even though we're not going to look at the Sudan, Sudan around 8,000 BCE, sorghum, which is another type of grain, and cattle. All right. So you got meat and leather and milk. Okay. We already talked about Mesopotamia. In China, we said rice and millet. Even though I didn't write it up there, the Chinese also domesticated pigs. Okay, so pigs are able to be used for the meat and all of the other stuff. And they were the first, and like I said, I don't think that they've ever been domesticated, to domesticate chickens. Okay, now, what do we use chickens for? Okay, so obviously we fry them. So food, number one, but someone else said it? Eggs. Okay, so we also eat their eggs. Okay, so they provide two different, because I suppose if you pluck them, you can use them as pillows or, whatever, keep your head comfortable. I don't know, I wouldn't use chicken feathers. But now, people use goose feathers and stuff like that. But okay. So they are useful for that kind of stuff. When we look at Mexico and Peru, areas in the Americas, just FYI, things like potatoes are native to the Americas, all right? Potatoes did not exist in Europe until after 1492, all right? Having potatoes, for all of the native, indigenous, Latin cultures, I will say you're welcome. All right, for French fries and hash browns and tater tots and the crinkle cut ones at Chick-fil-A, all of that. All right, that comes from there. Okay, corn or maize. All right, that is a strictly like Mexican thing. Okay. And for you Italians, tomatoes. All right, tomatoes are strictly a South American thing. That's where they were invented. And so I often ask people, well, then, if the Italians didn't get tomatoes until 1492, what did they put on their noodles before then? Okay, so obviously, it revolutionizes, this global thing, revolutionizes the way people eat, the way people live, the way people do all of this stuff, which is one of the reasons why I'm a history nerd. Okay, and so just to kind of give you a preview, all right, we have a few minutes. These are the societies that we're going to look at, the early societies. We're going to start with the Mesopotamians, okay, then we're going to look at the Egyptians, all right. We're going to look at the early Indian societies, and then, of course, we're going to look at early Chinese society, because those are the 4 areas that were the first to develop agriculture. Okay, the first to realize we can grow plants on purpose. We can capture these animals, and we no longer have to worry about going out and hunting. Now we have a ready supply of meat. In addition to meat, we have a supply of clothing. We have a supply of milk. We have a supply of cheese and butter and creamy sauces and all of that other stuff. Okay, now other areas, because we are going to talk about other areas, all right, that didn't quite develop the same way. Okay, now looking at Europe, different parts of Europe, Europe was a couple thousand years behind, all right, places like Iraq and Egypt and stuff like that. Okay, and it more had to do with, you know, just the geography of these areas. Okay, and we'll look first at Southern Europe. Okay. So, for example, areas like Greece and the Balkans, eventually, yes, they do learn these principles of agriculture, and they do learn how to domesticate animals, but all of that knowledge actually came from Mesopotamia, from Iraq, okay? I promise I will come back, all right? So somehow people were able to travel from here to, here's Greece, okay? Which, honestly, I mean, it is it is a long journey. But when you look at the planet in comparison, it is a relatively closer one, okay? And so people from Greece, you know, traveled and were able to gain that knowledge. People from Mesopotamia traveled and were able to pass that knowledge on, okay? In parts of the Mediterranean, and in this case, we're talking about, you know, different parts of Italy, southern France, maybe southern Spain, definitely North Africa, to have, you know, those things, we're not 100% sure, okay? But obviously looking at the evidence and just looking at the environment, well, obviously people probably traveled from point A to point B and took that knowledge with them, okay? Because it is predominantly ocean, that makes that travel a little bit easier. Like, you don't have to walk across mountains and deserts and all that other stuff. You can just build a very primitive raft and you can float, you know, along the different parts. And so, because eventually we do see that these ideas spread into, you know, parts of Italy and parts of France and in the southern part, okay? You know, southern Italy, southern France, parts of North Africa. Right? So you know, in this case, agriculture doesn't develop on its own. It actually is knowledge that's brought from other areas. Okay? Now, Central and Northern Europe. Okay? So now we're talking about, you know, like Germany and England and Northern France and like the Netherlands and Belgium and then, you know, those northern countries. Okay? People literally walked, all right? There's always been people that, even though the rest of society has settled and has domesticated and has, you know, there's always going to be those loners, those wanderers, those people that, you know, have to be out there, have that wanderlust. And so there is evidence of groups traveling from Turkey, from this southern European, you know, area, through the Balkans, into Hungary, and then once you get into Hungary, which is Central Europe, some of them settled, but from there you have a lot of, like, you know, smaller rivers that you can navigate into other parts, okay? Despite all of this, all right, one of the main reasons agriculture and civilization doesn't take hold the way it does in Iraq and in Egypt, because in those places, like I said, they become huge agricultural powers, you know, 12,000 years ago. The first cities are in Iraq and in Egypt. Okay, thousands and thousands of years ago, and thousands of years before Europe. Okay, Europe is colder. All right, despite the Ice Age being over, Europe is still cold. All right, so it's a little bit more difficult to grow a lot of the same crops or to have that crop growing schedule that places like Egypt have. Okay, Central and Northern Europe still is today, not as much, but especially 10,000 years ago, is just full of forests. Okay, completely covered in forest. If you want to start a farm, what's the first thing you have to do? Yes, get rid of those trees. All right? Well, remember, we're still talking, 10, 12,000 years ago. You don't just go down to Home Depot and buy like 20 chainsaws and start cutting down trees, and then you buy some stump grinders and you grind it all up and you pull them out. All right?
Even then, that's a nightmare.
You're like, even today, like that, I would not want that job. All right? So yeah, because of this, okay, yeah, maybe they cut down 2 of those big ass trees, and it's like, you know what, we're done. We can't grow it right here, we're not growing it, all right? And so yeah, the farms were a lot smaller, the ground was a lot harsher, the weather was a lot more difficult, so we don't see that huge, agricultural industry, and because we don't see that, we don't see these huge cities, okay? And so in this case, they kind of have to adapt. We have different crops, we have different sizes, we have, different animals, different planting routine, whereas in Egypt, you can, have it year round. Oh, this is where we get the tradition, okay, you have to, plant in the spring and grow in the summer, harvest in the fall, and then save it all up and hope you don't die in the winter. Okay, and then when spring comes again, then you just start it all over. All right. Whereas in Egypt, they're like, we got food, we got beer, we got everything year round. All right. It just constantly keeps growing. We got sunshine, we got warmth, we got desert, we got the river. All right. And flat land with no trees. All right. So yeah. Okay. The animal that is mostly domesticated in Europe is cattle. Okay. But most of the people there, small farms, no big cities, survive on cattle, what little food they grow, but predominantly, I didn't write it up there, predominantly they keep that hunting lifestyle, all right? They go out and hunt, okay? Which that hunting lifestyle, obviously, doesn't give rise to these huge civilizations, okay? So, we'll finish up with this for today, all right? Why does agriculture make a huge difference? Why does it lead to the beginnings of societies and cities and cultures? Well, number one, agriculture provides a lot of food. Eventually, there is leftover food, all right? There is a surplus, all right? Now, since there is enough food to eat, okay, you're the closest. Our babies here aren't starving to death in infancy, okay? If for whatever reason mom dies in childbirth, because it was a very common occurrence even as recently as 150 years ago, we can just milk the cow and give our poor orphaned baby milk to drink, and he's nourished and he grows, and etc., etc., okay? More children, you guys are the grown-ups now, reach adulthood, all right? And those adults now have more babies, okay? So we see a population increase, all right? A population explosion, all right? And all of this food, all of this surplus, all of these things lead to that. Eventually, there's so much food, and here's where we get the other stuff, not everyone has to be a farmer, okay? There is so much food, we're losing it. It's being wasted. And so the people, all right, and I am so sorry, who are horrible, shitty farmers, okay, are like, fine, I can stop growing food. You're like, Santos, you have not seen my heart. No, stop growing food and develop other interests and develop other pursuits. What's your name? Abby. realizes that she's really good at working with metal. And she figures out how to heat things up and shape it and forge it. And so suddenly she becomes the village blacksmith. All right? And so the farmers who need tools which help them farm or help them keep track of their animals, or I suppose if they still have to hunt a little, gives them better weapons, now are able to go to the blacksmith. And how does she survive? Well, you want, some of my stuff that I make? Yeah, give me all that wheat and give me the beer and, oh yeah, milk. Oh, I love cheese. Give me some of your cheese. All right? And so we begin to see that kind of thing. Okay? And I am so sorry, I don't remember your name. Angelina, that's right. Okay? Angelina also sucks at farming. All right? She will kill a cactus. All right? And those things are hard to kill. All right? But she has a talent for making wagons. So she figures out that instead of farmers having to carry all their shit everywhere and she's like, what if we have a thing that kind of rolls? She's responsible for the invention of the wheel. And then, of course, we put stuff on top. Farmer here can put all of his goods on there and then just either push or pull the wagon. And somehow people are crazy for her wagons. And she's like, well, give me all your wheat. Actually, no, I don't want the wheat. Give me the bread. All right, I want already made bread, I want butter, and I want lots of milk in exchange for a wagon. Okay? And so, little by little, okay? And we'll get into this, obviously, with each chapter, but it isn't just the crafts, but we begin to see artists. We begin to see business. Religion begins to expand, because right now, it's only explaining the weird shit that happens outside that we don't know why, okay? But now religion begins to grow into a whole, industry, okay? And then, of course, we begin to see, warriors and fighters, because there's going to be, we're humans, we're always going to fight. There's going to be conflict between the different groups. But as these things grow, we see the villages become towns, and the towns become cities. All right? When you get a group of humans together, all right, like I said, our worst tendencies will come out. So, now we need to organize. And so we begin to see the birth of early governments. Someone needs to make the rules. Someone needs to enforce those rules. And so now everyone, has their place. We have the farmer, we have the blacksmith, we have the wagon maker. Also sucks at farming, sorry. But he can paint. And so we begin to see the rise of artists. All right, he looks pretty ripped, so does he. We have the warriors now to enforce the laws. All right, and suddenly someone decides, well, you need someone to kind of plan it. So we see our first king or queen here, who's in charge of things, and starts making the rules. And so little by little, over thousands of years, of course, we see then the development of a society and a complex civilization. All right, questions? When we